All right, so get this. We're going to deep dive into a request that's both fascinating and a bit unexpected. We're going to be exploring what it takes to become, well, the Pope.
That's right, the Pope. And, we're going to try to unravel the path to arguably one of the most influential positions in the world, a position steeped in, well, tradition, power, and, a massive global following.
And get this, our source material is actually a transcript from a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Talk about finding knowledge in some pretty unexpected places, huh? But this isn't just going to be about, like, listing steps. It's about uncovering those hidden complexities and those fascinating details behind this very unique career path. I mean, we're talking secret lists, intense elections, and the kind of dedication that, well, spans a lifetime.
Absolutely. And I think the first thing to understand is that, well, unlike most leadership roles, you can't simply run for Pope.
Hmm.
It's not an election in the traditional sense. It's much more of a, how do I put this, an inside job.
An inside job, you say? Okay, I'm intrigued. So, spill the beans. Who gets to choose the next leader of over 1 billion Catholics worldwide?
Well, it's the cardinals who elect the new pope, and historically speaking, they've almost always chosen from within their own ranks. In fact, you have to go all the way back to the 14th century to find the last time a non-cardinal became pope.
Wow, the 14th century? That's wild. Talk about an exclusive club.
It is.
But it makes sense, I guess. You wouldn't just, I don't know, hand over the keys to the kingdom, or should they say the Vatican, to just anyone. But still, to have that level of control. Is this system truly meritocratic? Or does it leave room for, I don't know, bias and favoritism to creep in?
Yeah, that's a question that has been debated for centuries, literally. And there's certainly arguments to be made on both sides. I mean, on one hand, limiting the selection to cardinals ensures that the next pope has a deep understanding of the church's inner workings.
Right.
And also the complexities of the role. But on the other hand, it's also true that such a system can create a sort of echo chamber, potentially limiting the diversity of perspectives and experiences represented in the papacy.
That's a great point. It's like any system with concentrated power. There are always trade-offs to consider. But let's get back to the path itself. So you got these cardinals, the elite of the church, responsible for choosing the next pope. But how does one even become a cardinal in the first place? What's step one on this ladder to ultimate religious leadership?
Well, you can't just wake up one morning and decide, I think I'll be a cardinal today. It all starts much, much earlier with a calling to the priesthood.
Right, the priesthood. But it's not just about robes and preaching, is it? I mean, the source material mentions some pretty intense training. What does that involve exactly?
You're right. It's incredibly rigorous. Think of it like becoming a doctor or a lawyer. Years of dedicated study, exams, and a level of commitment that goes, well, far beyond a typical 9-to-5 job.
So what are we talking here? Years of seminary, endless theological debates, mastering ancient languages.
Pretty much. You're usually looking at a college degree in Catholic philosophy, followed by a master's in divinity. And even then, that's just the beginning. There are ongoing exams, assessments, and, a continuous process of spiritual and intellectual formation.
It sounds incredibly demanding. But even with all that training, there's a pretty big catch, right? Not just anyone can become a priest, let alone pope.
You're referring to the eligibility requirements, I presume?
Exactly. To even be considered for the priesthood, you have to be a man, unmarried, and committed to staying that way.
Yes, the celibacy requirement remains a cornerstone of the Catholic priesthood. And by extension, the papacy. It's a tradition that dates back centuries and continues to spark debate both within and outside the church. But for now, let's stick to the career path itself. So you've gone through years of rigorous training, you've met the requirements, you've been ordained as a priest. What's next on this papal path?
Well, according to our YouTube source, the next step is becoming a bishop. But it sounds like the competition really heats up at this stage. It's not just about showing up and giving a great sermon anymore.
You're absolutely right. It's a whole different ballgame. We're talking about, going from leading a single parish to overseeing an entire region, multiple churches, a cathedral. It's a massive leap in responsibility and a very, very select group. Imagine this. There are roughly 400,000 Catholic priests worldwide, but only about 5,000 bishops.
Wow. Those are some seriously slim odds. So how do you even get considered for a bishopric? Is there like a bishop application form you can download?
Huh. If only it were that simple. This is where things get really interesting and a bit, secretive. Remember that inside job we talked about earlier? Well, it comes into play big time here. Every 3 years, The current bishops, well, they create a list of potential successors. Priests they deem worthy of consideration for bishoprics.
So it's like a secret society with a super exclusive membership list.
Yeah.
But getting your name on that list must be a pretty big deal, right? I mean, it doesn't guarantee you'll become a bishop, but it's got to be a step in the right direction.
You're absolutely right. Being on that list is a testament to your service, your dedication, and your potential to lead. But it's just the beginning of a very long and complex process.
Okay, let's say your name makes it onto this super secret list.
Okay.
What happens next? Do you, I don't know, get a phone call from the Pope himself saying, congratulations, you made the cut?
Not quite. This is where a somewhat mysterious figure enters the picture.
The nuncio. Who's that?
The nuncio is essentially the Pope's ambassador in each country, and it's their job to investigate the candidates on that secret bishop list, ultimately choosing 3 names to send to the Vatican for, well, further review.
So the nuncio is like a papal headhunter, scouring the globe for the best and brightest potential bishops.
That's a great way to put it. They conduct deep dives into the candidates' backgrounds, interview people who know them, really try to get a sense of, who these men are and what they stand for.
That's intense. And what happens if the Vatican isn't impressed with the nuncio's picks? Do they just, send them back to the drawing board?
Believe it or not, that actually happens sometimes. If the Vatican rejects all 3 names, the nuncio has to go back and start the whole process over again. Talk about pressure.
Wow. I can't even imagine the stress of being a nuncio. But even if you make it past the nuncio, it still sounds like a long road to becoming a bishop.
It is. The entire process, from a bishop retiring to their replacement being appointed, can take years.
Yes.
Years.
So patience really is a virtue in this line of work.
It certainly is. But let's say after all those years, you make it through the rigorous selection process, you impress the nuncio, get the Vatican's approval. Congratulations, you're a bishop. But you're still not Pope, are you?
Nope. Still a long way to go. What's the next rung on this ladder to papal power?
Next up, we have the cardinals, the elite group responsible for electing the new pope.
Ah, the cardinals. To be honest, I always pictured them as being like the bosses of the bishops. But that's not quite right, is it?
Not exactly. It's more nuanced than that. Think of it this way. Cardinals are essentially bishops with additional responsibilities. They still hold their positions as bishops, but they also have, specific duties within the church. And the most important of those duties is electing the new pope.
So out of the 5,000 or so bishops, only a select group, about 200, get to be cardinals.
That's correct. And becoming a cardinal isn't something you apply for or campaign for. It's solely at the discretion of the pope. He chooses who he sees fit to elevate to this prestigious position.
Talk about power. So not only do you have to impress the nuncio in the Vatican to become a bishop, but you also have to catch the eye of the current pope to even have a shot at becoming a cardinal, let alone pope.
It's a long and winding road, that's for sure. But let's say you've managed to climb that ladder, priest to bishop to cardinal. You're now one of the select few who hold the fate of the Catholic Church in their hands. What happens when a pope, dies or retires?
Well, our trusty YouTube transcript mentions something called a papal conclave, which, sounds pretty intense. What exactly goes down when the papal seat becomes vacant?
Get ready for some serious drama, because a papal conclave is an event unlike anything else in the world.
Bring on the drama. I'm all ears.
All right, so picture this.
Yeah.
When a pope dies, which statistically is the more likely scenario, all cardinals under the age of 80.
Wait, there's an age limit for this too.
Yes, 80 is the cutoff for participating in a papal conclave. But back to the action. All eligible cardinals are summoned to Vatican City. And here's where things get really interesting. They're completely cut off from the outside world.
Hold on, you're telling me no phones, no internet, no contact with anyone outside the Vatican walls?
You got it. They're essentially in a self-imposed lockdown until they choose a new pope.
Wow. That's intense. I can't even imagine being completely isolated like that, especially with such a weighty decision to make.
It's a tradition that goes back centuries, designed to ensure that the cardinals can focus solely on their sacred duty without any outside influence or distractions.
It definitely adds a whole other level of intrigue to the process.
Yeah.
But how do they actually go about choosing the new pope? Do they just sit around a table and debate until someone emerges as the clear front runner?
It's a bit more structured than that. The process is steeped in ritual and tradition, with roots that go back to the early days of the church. They gather in the Sistine Chapel 4 times a day to vote, and each time they vote, they're hoping to see that magic number,
Hmm.
2/3.
Two-thirds. That seems like a pretty high bar to clear, especially with so many cardinals involved.
It is, and that's why these papal conclaves can sometimes drag on for weeks, even months.
Yeah.
And unlike a typical election where you might, I don't know, raise your hand or punch a ballot, this process is much more elaborate.
Okay, I'm picturing this scene. The cardinals in their red robes, the hushed silence of the Sistine Chapel, the weight of history hanging in the air. What happens next?
Each cardinal writes down his choice on a piece of paper, approaches the altar, says a Latin prayer, and then places his ballot in a designated receptacle.
Yeah.
It's a blend of, ancient ritual and modern decision making that truly sets this process apart.
I have to admit, the whole visual is pretty stunning. It's like something out of a movie. But how does the rest of the world know when a new pope has been chosen? I mean, they're all locked away in the Vatican with no way to communicate.
But they have their ways. Remember the media frenzy that surrounds these events. News crews from all over the world camp out in St. Peter's Square, their cameras trained on the chimney atop the Sistine Chapel. They're all waiting for that iconic signal, the smoke.
Right, the famous white smoke. But what's the story there? Is it like, I don't know, a special smoke machine they fire up when a decision is made?
It's actually much simpler and more symbolic than that. After each round of voting, the ballots are burned. If no one has received the required 2/3 majority, they add a special chemical to the fire and the smoke comes out black, signaling to the world that the wait continues. But when a new pope is finally chosen, the ballots are burned without the chemical. And voila! White smoke billows from the chimney, announcing to the world, Habemus Papam, we have a pope.
That's amazing. Such a simple act, but it carries so much weight, so much history, so much anticipation.
It truly is, and it speaks to the power of symbolism and ritual, especially in a world that's constantly bombarded with information and instant communication.
So let me get this straight. You go through like years, sometimes decades of rigorous training. You climb the ranks from priest to bishop to cardinal. You survive a potentially grueling papal conclave, and then finally you get to lead the Catholic Church. What a journey.
It is a remarkable journey filled with challenges, sacrifices, and ultimately a profound sense of purpose. But even with all that, there's one final step that takes place before the new pope can address the world from that famous balcony, choosing a new name.
Oh, right. Popes don't keep their given names, do they? They all choose a new name when they take on the mantle of the papacy.
Well, they can, technically. There's no official rule stating they must change their name, but it's a tradition that dates back centuries. And most new popes choose to honor a predecessor, invoke their legacy, and signal continuity within the church by taking the name of a previous pope.
It's almost like stepping into a lineage,
Yeah.
carrying on the torch of those who came before. And it's in that moment when the new pope accepts his new name that those final ballots are burned, producing that iconic white smoke that tells the world a new chapter has begun.
It's a fascinating blend of tradition and symbolism, the culmination of a centuries-old process, and it all comes down to that single puff of white smoke signifying a new era for the Catholic Church and for the world.
It's amazing to think that so much history, tradition, and even drama is packed into that one puff of smoke. But I'm curious, is there any significance to the name a new pope chooses? I mean, do they just pick a name they like, or is there more to it than that?
That's a great question, and one that deserves its own deep dive. I mean, the choice of a papal name can reveal a lot about the new pope's intentions, his priorities, and the direction he hopes to steer the church.
Sounds like we got our next rabbit hole to explore. But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer complexity and grandeur of this whole process. It's really something else.
It is, and it makes you wonder, given all the challenges and hurdles, what kind of person is drawn to this path? What motivates them to dedicate their entire lives to this pursuit?
It's a question worth pondering. What kind of individual sets out on this path, knowing the sacrifices, the scrutiny, the immense responsibility that awaits them at the end? What drives them?
I think to answer that, we need to delve into the heart of the priesthood, explore the motivations behind a life dedicated to service and faith.
Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us. But before we get too deep into the psychology of the papacy, let's take a closer look at one of the most controversial aspects of this whole journey, the celibacy requirement.
Yes, it's a topic that deserves a deeper exploration, especially considering its historical context and the ongoing debates surrounding it.
Okay, celibacy. It's one of those topics that tends to spark some pretty heated debates, both within the church and outside of it. But for someone on the path to becoming pope, it's not just a point of discussion, it's a life-altering commitment.
You're right. It's a fundamental aspect of the Catholic priesthood and therefore the papacy. And to understand it fully, we need to go beyond the sound bites and delve into its historical context.
All right, let's go back in time. When did this whole celibacy thing become a rule for priests, and what were the reasons behind it?
Well, it wasn't always a hard and fast rule, as you might imagine. In the early centuries of the church, there were differing views and practices regarding clerical marriage. Some clergy were married, while others, well, they opted for a celibate life. But gradually, the tide began to turn.
What caused that shift? Was it a sudden change or more of a gradual evolution?
It was definitely more of a gradual evolution influenced by a confluence of factors. Around the fourth century, we start to see a growing emphasis on celibacy within the church. This was partly driven by the idea that a celibate life fostered greater spiritual purity and allowed priests to devote themselves fully to God.
So the idea was that by foregoing marriage and family life, priests could, I don't know, channel all their energy and attention into their spiritual duties.
Exactly. It was seen as a way of, imitating Jesus, who according to Christian tradition was unmarried, and as a way of, prioritizing the spiritual realm over earthly attachments.
That makes sense from a theological standpoint, but
Yeah.
but I'm guessing there are also some practical considerations at play here.
You're absolutely right. Practicality and theology often, went hand in hand in these matters. One of the key practical concerns was the issue of inheritance in church property. If priests were allowed to marry and have children, questions arose about, well, what would happen to their belongings and the church's assets upon their death.
Ah, so celibacy helped, like, avoid those messy inheritance disputes and ensure that the church's, wealth and property stayed within the institution.
Precisely. And this was particularly important during periods when the church was, amassing land and wealth. Celibacy helped maintain the church's financial stability and independence.
It sounds like celibacy, at least initially, was as much about, protecting the church's financial interests as it was about spiritual purity.
Yeah, it was a complex issue, and those practical concerns definitely, played a role. But over time, the theological arguments for celibacy took on a life of their own, becoming, deeply ingrained in the church's doctrine and identity.
So fast forward to today, and celibacy remains a non-negotiable requirement for those, aspiring to the priesthood and ultimately to the papacy. But it's also a requirement that continues to be challenged and debated, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's a topic that generates, strong opinions on both sides. Critics of the celibacy rule often point to the potential for loneliness, the psychological strain of denying a fundamental human need for intimacy, and the fact that it excludes women from the priesthood.
Right. And it's not just about, priests either. Nuns who also dedicate their lives to the church take vows of celibacy as well.
Yeah.
This raises questions about gender equality within the church and the different expectations placed on men and women who choose a religious life.
It's a multifaceted issue with deep historical roots and a profound impact on the lives of those who choose this path. And it's a discussion that's likely to continue, as the church navigates the complexities of the modern world.
It's one of those topics that doesn't have, easy answers or quick solutions, but it's a conversation that needs to happen, and it's certainly something for our listener to ponder, as they explore this unique career path. So we've talked about the long road to becoming pope, the sacrifices involved, particularly the commitment to celibacy. But once you reach the pinnacle of this journey, what's it actually like to be the pope? What does a typical day look like for the leader of over 1 billion Catholics?
Well, It's not exactly a 9 to 5 job with weekends off. The Pope's role is multifaceted, demanding, and unlike any other position in the world. He's not just the spiritual leader of a vast global community, but also a head of state, a diplomat, and a global influencer who shapes conversations on matters of faith, ethics, and social justice.
Talk about wearing a lot of hats. It's almost hard to wrap your head around all the different roles and responsibilities that come with being Pope. Can you break it down a bit? What does it actually mean to juggle those different aspects of the job?
Imagine this. As a spiritual leader, the Pope is responsible for guiding the Catholic Church in matters of, doctrine, faith, and morals. He appoints bishops, creates cardinals, and oversees the church's, vast network of parishes, schools, and charitable organizations. He also, leads major religious services, delivers sermons, and writes encyclicals, which are official letters addressing theological and social concerns that are read by Catholics around the world.
It sounds like a massive undertaking. You're talking about being the CEO of a global organization, but with an added, spiritual dimension that takes it to a whole other level.
That's a good analogy, but it goes beyond just the organizational aspects. The Pope is also the head of state for Vatican City, which, despite its small size, is an independent sovereign nation. He appoints officials, manages diplomatic relations with other countries, and oversees the Vatican's government and institutions.
It's crazy to think that within the heart of Rome you have this tiny independent city state ruled by the Pope. It's like stepping into another world, a world where faith and politics intersect in a truly unique way.
It's a remarkable blend of temporal and spiritual power, and then there's the diplomatic role. The Pope is a globally respected figure, and his voice carries significant weight on the world stage. He often travels to different countries, meets with heads of state, and addresses global audiences on issues ranging from peace and poverty to climate change and human rights.
It sounds like a job that requires incredible stamina, both physical and mental. You need to be in peak condition to handle the travel, the constant public appearances, the weight of expectations and the pressure of addressing some of the world's most pressing issues.
It's definitely not a role for the faint of heart. The demands are constant, and the stakes are incredibly high. But what's fascinating is that it's a position traditionally held for life. Talk about commitment.
That's right. It's not like you can just retire from being Pope after a few years and take up gardening or something. But wait, didn't Pope Benedict XVI resign back in 2013?
You're absolutely right. That was a historic event, a break from centuries of tradition. It was the first time a Pope had resigned in almost 600 years, and it certainly, raised questions about the future of the papacy.
So it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility for a Pope to step down before death.
It seems that way. While it's still a rare occurrence, Pope Benedict XVI's decision opened the door to the possibility of popes choosing to retire if they feel they're no longer able to fulfill the demands of the role.
It makes you wonder if we might see more papal resignations in the future, especially as life expectancies increase.
It's certainly a possibility, but regardless of whether a pope serves for life or chooses to step down, the demands of the role remain the same. It's a position that requires a unique combination of qualities, motivations, and perhaps even a touch of destiny.
Okay, let's get into that. What kind of person is drawn to this path? What are the qualities, the motivations, the inner drive that lead someone to aspire to such a position?
That's a question that has intrigued people for centuries. And while there's no one size fits all answer, certain qualities seem to be, common among those who rise to the highest levels of the church.
Like what kind of personality traits or skills would you need to not only survive but thrive in such a demanding role?
Well, first and foremost, a deep and unwavering faith is essential. This isn't just a job; it's a calling, a vocation. Those who aspire to be pope are driven by a profound belief in the teachings of the Catholic Church, and a desire to serve God and humanity.
So it's not about like power or ambition.
While those things, might exist in some individuals,
Yeah.
they can't be the primary motivators. The demands of the role are too great. The sacrifice is too significant for someone to endure it all without a genuine commitment to their faith and the mission of the church.
I can see that, but faith alone isn't enough, is it? You'd also need, incredible intellect, leadership skills, the ability to connect with people from all walks of life.
You're absolutely right. To lead the Catholic Church, you need to be a brilliant theologian, a skilled communicator, a compassionate listener, a shrewd diplomat, and a visionary leader. It's a role that demands a rare combination of intellectual depth, emotional intelligence, and practical skills.
It's interesting though because when you think about some of the most famous popes throughout history, they weren't all cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
You have figures like Pope Gregory the Great, known for his piety and theological writings, and then you have someone like Pope Julius II, who was a shrewd politician and even led armies into battle.
That's a great point. It speaks to the diversity of personalities and approaches that have shaped the papacy over the centuries. There's no single mold for what makes a good pope. It's a role that has been interpreted and enacted in vastly different ways, reflecting the changing times and the unique qualities of each individual.
It also makes me wonder if the qualities needed to become pope are the same ones needed to be an effective leader once you're in that position. I mean, is it possible for someone to be, skilled at navigating the path to the papacy, but then struggle with the actual demands of the role once they're there?
That's a fascinating question, and one that historians and theologians have debated for centuries. There are certainly examples of popes who were adept at maneuvering through the church's political landscape, but perhaps less successful at providing spiritual leadership or navigating complex global issues.
So it's not just about getting to the top. It's about what you do once you're there.
Exactly. The papacy is a constant balancing act requiring a blend of spiritual wisdom, political savvy, and a deep understanding of the human condition.
And let's not forget the stamina we talked about earlier. You'd have to be in good physical and mental shape to handle the travel, the public appearances, the constant demands on your time and attention.
No doubt. It's a role that takes a toll even on the most robust individuals, but
Hmm.
but beyond those essential qualities, the faith, the intellect, the leadership skills, the stamina, I think there's also a certain intangible something that sets those who become pope apart.
Wait, what do you mean? What's that extra ingredient, that special sauce that makes someone papal material?
It's hard to, define, but it's a combination of charisma, wisdom, humility, and a genuine love for people. It's that ability to inspire, to connect, to make people feel seen and heard, even amidst the pomp and circumstance that surrounds the papacy.
So it's not just about being, smart and capable. It's about having a certain presence, a certain way of being in the world that draws people in and makes them feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Precisely. It's about having a heart for service, a genuine desire to make a positive impact on the world, and the ability to convey those qualities to others.
So to sum it all up, if we were to create a Pope wanted ad, we'd be looking for someone with deep faith, intellectual brilliance, exceptional leadership skills, boundless stamina, and that intangible charisma that allows them to connect with people on a deeper level.
That's a pretty good job description. But even with all those qualities, there's no guarantee of success. The
Yeah.
path to becoming pope is long, arduous, and filled with unexpected twists and turns.
And let's not forget the element of luck we talked about earlier. Being in the right place at the right time, catching the eye of the right people, navigating the complexities of church politics.
Luck definitely plays a role, but it's not just about chance. It's about being prepared, being open to opportunities, and being willing to seize the moment when it arises.
It's like that saying, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity.
Exactly. And in the case of the papacy, that preparation involves, years of study, service, and dedication to the church.
It's a journey that requires not just ambition, but a deep sense of purpose, a willingness to sacrifice, and a steadfast belief in the power of faith to make a difference in the world.
And it's a journey that even for those who never reach the ultimate goal can be, profoundly transformative and impactful.
That's a great point. Not everyone who sets out on this path, becomes pope, but the journey itself can shape them into remarkable individuals who contribute to the church and the world in meaningful ways.
Absolutely. And that's something worth celebrating and acknowledging. The impact of faith and service goes far beyond, titles and positions.
Well said. But speaking of titles and positions,
Hmm.
there's one more aspect of the papacy that we haven't really touched on yet.
Yeah, and what's that?
The whole infallible thing.
Ah, yes, papal infallibility, a concept that's often misunderstood and misrepresented.
Exactly. I think it's time we clear up some misconceptions and delve into what papal infallibility really means and how it plays out in the modern world. All right, let's talk about this whole papal infallibility thing. When I hear that phrase, I can't help but picture the Pope as some kind of superhero who can never be wrong.
It's a popular misconception. In reality, the concept of papal infallibility is much more nuanced and limited than that. It's not a blanket statement that everything a pope says is automatically true or beyond question.
Okay, so it's not like a divine superpower that protects the Pope from ever making a mistake.
Yeah.
So in real terms then, what are the conditions for a papal statement to be considered, infallible?
Well, there are very specific criteria that need to be met. Firstly, the Pope must be speaking ex cathedra, which is Latin for, from the chair. This refers to when the Pope is formally proclaiming a doctrine of faith or morals for the entire Catholic Church.
So it's not just casual opinions or off-the-cuff remarks. It has to be a formal declaration intended for the whole church.
Exactly. It's a rare and solemn act reserved for defining, core beliefs. Secondly, the declaration must pertain to matters of faith or morals, not things like, scientific theories, political stances, or personal preferences.
So we're talking about the fundamental teachings of the Catholic Church, the beliefs that shape the faith of millions around the world. What else is needed for a papal statement to be considered infallible?
Well, the Pope must also be speaking with the clear intention of binding the entire church to the teaching. It has to be crystal clear that this isn't just a suggestion or a personal opinion. It's a binding declaration for all Catholics.
It sounds like it's not just about the words themselves, but also the context, the intent, and the weight the Pope places behind those words.
Precisely. It's a complex interplay of factors. And finally, when all these conditions are met, the Catholic Church believes that the Holy Spirit guides and protects the Pope from error in those specific pronouncements.
So it's not that the Pope is inherently incapable of making mistakes. It's the belief that in these specific situations, the Holy Spirit intervenes to ensure the accuracy and truthfulness of the teachings.
That's a great way to understand it. And to emphasize just how rare this is, throughout the entire history of the Catholic Church, papal infallibility has only been formally invoked twice.
Only twice. Wow. That really puts it into perspective. What were those two instances? What teachings were considered so crucial that papal infallibility was invoked?
The first time was in 1854 when Pope Pius VII proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception of Mary. This teaching states that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was conceived without sin.
And the second time?
The second instance was in 1950 when Pope Pius XII defined the dogma of the Assumption of Mary, which states that Mary was taken bodily into heaven at the end of her earthly life.
So both instances relate to Mary, the mother of Jesus. It's fascinating that these two teachings, both about Mary, were the only ones deemed significant enough to invoke papal infallibility.
It speaks to the central role of Mary within Catholic theology and the importance placed on these specific doctrines. But it's also important to note that the concept of papal infallibility is still debated and discussed within the Church. Not all theologians agree on its necessity or its historical validity.
So even within the Church, there are different perspectives on this doctrine, which goes to show that even matters of faith can be subject to ongoing discussion and interpretation.
Exactly. It highlights the dynamic nature of religious belief and the ongoing search for understanding within the Catholic tradition.
Well, this deep dive has been an incredible journey. We started with a YouTube video explaining the stepping to become pope, and now we're unraveling centuries-old doctrines and theological debates.
It demonstrates that even a seemingly simple question like how to become pope can open up a world of history, tradition, faith, and ongoing intellectual exploration.
And for our listener who requested this deep dive, we hope this has given you a much deeper understanding of the complexities and nuances of the papacy. It's a path filled with challenges, sacrifices, and ultimately a profound sense of purpose.
And perhaps the most valuable takeaway is that understanding any institution, especially one as ancient and influential as the Catholic Church, requires us to go beyond the surface and grapple with its complexities and contradictions. It's in that exploration that we truly begin to grasp the richness and depth of human experience, both in its spiritual and temporal dimensions.
Beautifully put. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of the Pope. We've explored the steps, the history, the controversies, and the enduring power of this unique position. We hope you've enjoyed this journey with us, and we encourage you to continue to explore, question, and dive deep into the topics that spark your curiosity. Until next time, happy diving.